Well, it was very interesting when you and I first started discussing it. I remember you telling me that when people are doing experiments, they might be adding this reagent to that one and making judgments about when things change colour or all sorts of things. But actually, this is not at all clear when something changes from red to green, or how you add things, how fast, whether you pour it in or add it in drops. All these things that experienced chemists kind of know how to do, but inexperienced ones don't even know that they don't know.
Exactly, and it also leads into this idea of reproducibility, which I thinking in research chemistry has become a hot topic because of some fraudulent behaviour. But actually, if you even ignore the fraudulent aspect, it's if you write down a procedure and then you ask another person to follow it, it will be different in the lab, and I guess it's the same in a kitchen.
Yeah, definitely, and there are again those certain aspects of cooking that only years of experience will really allow you to achieve, and it is through understanding. I mean, a great example I can give you is I've just spent a week making donuts every morning, and honestly, it's everything from the smell of the yeast when it really hydrates properly to the sound that the dough makes as it starts to form into a tight dough that you can hear it in the bowl mixer. And it kind of goes from a kind of splattery kind of noise into something that's a bit more kind of a heavier dough. And then it goes into a kind of punching noise where you almost feel like this dough is really formed in something very elastic. And it's those kind of sensory cues as well that in the kitchen that we just become very accustomed to and used to. And we know how to, when, meats are cooked, to well, medium well, or rare, just purely by touching it, we can tell. But, an apprentice chef doesn't necessarily have those skills, but it's something that we learn. But we mindfully teach those skills because we know that that's something that, junior chefs need to learn.
It's very interesting, I think, this idea of using all your senses. One of the other strands of work I'm exploring at the moment is to look at how stone carvers and wood carvers learn their craft. Because there are clear parallels between stone carving and orthopedic surgery, using hard materials, using chisels. And the stone carvers, the stone carving tutors, have been telling me that they can tell what's going on 2 rooms away with their students by the sound. And they can tell if a piece of stone is about to break or what's going on, not by looking, but by hearing.
Wow.
And so there's this very sort of multi-sensory way of perceiving what's going on, which I guess you must have in the chemistry lab in the same way.
Actually, only yesterday we were demonstrating how to use a shrink line, and one of the things that you do on a shrink line, you're trying to keep your flask entirely free of air under, say, nitrogen or argon, and you have the glass vacuum line where you can, by the turn of a tap, you can you can remove the air via vacuum, and then you can let a gas in, and you can hear the sounds changing as you move the valve. You have a bubbler on the right hand side, and you can watch the rate at which the bubbles go up, and as it slows down, you know that the gas is going into your and you're listening to the sound of the pump, because you can also hear when that's working or not working. Exactly the same sort of skills, which if you're not trained to think about those things, you probably just completely miss.
And it's exactly the same in the operating theatre, where you're very sensitive to the sounds of the anaesthetic machine and the beeps and the sucker and things. And very often you know if something's going wrong because it becomes ominously quiet or something happens in the environment. But I was interested when you were describing that just now, because you were talking about turning a tap and you were gesturing like that. And I think there's something very sort of difficult to put into words about these physical movements that I think is what we're both describing, all of us describing.
Yeah. And I think in the kitchen we're taught to use our senses, whether it's explicitly put to us in that way or not, but it's everything from assessing whether a piece of fish is fresh and good to use. You will use all your senses, from how it smells, the look of the eyes, the feel of the skin, and it's all these kind of sensory elements that are so important when working in a kitchen to get the right result, that surely there must be some of these elements in terms of how we prepare, how we put this together, that can be transferable into other practices and environments.
And I think there's something about using your senses attentively. Mm-hmm. And so I've been thinking a lot about the difference between looking and seeing. When you can just, your eye can glance over something, but you don't really notice what's there, whereas seeing, hearing and listening, of course, and touching and feeling. But of course, in your case, I suppose there's I don't know, tasting and savouring, perhaps. You know,
Yes,
the difference between
sure.
just sort of putting something in your mouth and actually paying attention to what it is.
Well, we've all, you know, I think because there are chemical senses, and because as human beings we have a bit of fear of obviously poisoning ourselves or whatever, I think we do mindfully taste things to make sure that they're safe. But I think when you buy a sandwich from, you know, a supermarket, jump on the underground and eat it, I don't think flavour, taste and enjoyment is necessarily what you're getting from it. And I do think that, you know, when you are mindful about these things, you pick them up in a completely different way. So I think that although the chemical senses are maybe slightly different to some of the others, I do still think that we can become neglectful in a way of how they're working or how we can really appreciate with them.
Because, I mean, I guess you must have this with smell.
Absolutely.
Maybe not, not with taste so much. But
we try to encourage students in any lab except the chemical kitchen not to taste it. But I think this idea of close observation in science is critically important in the discovery process, actually. I think, you know, if we think back to Sir Alexander Fleming and, you know, this observation of this zone of inhibition around this mould, which had by chance got into his Petri dish, you know, a lot of people would have just passed that across because they wouldn't have recognized that it was unusual. They wouldn't have been thinking, what does that mean? And I think that's, you know, the purpose of this this new lab that we have. It's really to take students away from their sort of classical science training and just say, you know, just sort of be alive to what's happening around you, closely observe it, record it, and think about what things could mean.